I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, our weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, saving the euro, a $1 trillion emergency fund to save the beleaguered currency. But could Ireland have the key to unlock the crisis? Plus the impact of Europe's crisis on the oil industry. We speak to Algeria's oil minister. The world-famous Harrods department store, sold for more than $2 billion, did its Qatari buyers get a bargain? So it seems you can put a price on a currency, or at least on saving a currency. On the table right now, a $1 trillion deal to save the euro, staggering amount really, aimed at propping up the euro nations likely to fall into recession. But huge questions still remain over the viability of the currency, indeed the credibility of the EU institutions, and that includes the independence of the European Central Bank. On this program, we'll go some way to answering those questions with our various guests. But first, I want to break down that $1 trillion deal for you. We've got 16 nations sharing the euro currency. They're going to cough up $560 billion. International Monetary Fund, about $320 billion. And the European Union is putting up $78 billion. This is very important because it means EU countries which don't use the euro will also share the burden. So really, in the end, everyone will pay something. When we break it down further, you'll see that Germany really taking the lion's share here of $160 billion. France, which is Europe's second biggest economy, $119 billion. But look at this. Even tiny little Cyprus down there is going to stump up more than $1 billion to this fund. Why? Well, Greece's debt crisis has exposed similar financial time bombs throughout Europe, time bombs which we've seen before and we want to avoid again if the euro is to survive. Our case study we're going to look at is over here, Ireland, known for more than a decade as the Celtic Tiger with a AAA rating, but a nation like Greece, like Spain, like Portugal, that had been living beyond its means. In the boom times, up until 2007, Ireland's economy grew faster than many of its Western European rivals. Corporations moved to the Emerald Island, and the nation, known for exporting workers, opened its doors to migrant workers. So no surprise, really. Property prices soared, banks lent at record levels, governments spent more and more money. Should have seen the crash coming, really. And what a crash it was. Unemployment, that is forecast to hit 13.4% this year. The economy as a whole contracted 7.5% in 2009. And its budget deficit, look at this one, 14.3% of gross domestic product. That is higher than Greece. But unlike Greece, Ireland's taken measures to put its house in order. And that's why the country hasn't come under speculative attack. What do? Well, public sector workers accepted pay cuts of up to 15%. There were also cuts to social welfare and higher corporate tax rates. Plus, it nationalised the Anglo-Irish Bank, it took stakes in other banks, and it set aside $21.6 billion to form a so-called bad bank, which would absorb all of the country's toxic assets. And what's even more important here, if we're comparing with Greece, is that the unions and the public seem to be on the Irish government's side. Has it got a model that other nations, including Greece, can use? Earlier in the week, I spoke to economist and author Jim Powers from the Irish capital, Dublin.
Well, I think, that the problem in Greece over the years is that there has been serious mismanagement of the economy and the public finances, and politically it's very difficult to do anything about that because as we've seen over the last couple of weeks particularly, but indeed over the last 6 months, the Greeks are not happy about what needs to be done, and there does not appear to be a popular realisation that a country cannot borrow indefinitely without going into a situation of bankruptcy. I think the lesson that Ireland has learned is that back in 1986-87 we were in a similarly difficult situation, similar levels of government borrowing, and indeed government debt as a percentage of GDP was significantly higher than it is today. At that stage we did have a serious cutback in public spending. We had some tax increases initially, and very quickly, as we brought the public finances under control, confidence in the Irish economy started to be restored, and the 1990s turned out to be a period of very strong growth for the economy. I think most Irish people would look back on that experience and say, well, if we do the same thing this time, we will eventually get the economy back on track. I think the Greeks have got to realise that creating sustainable public finances is an absolute essential prerequisite for getting an economy back on track.
What's different about Ireland? Why can it carry on this path?
Well, I'm not sure there is anything different about Ireland. We went into recession earlier than any other European country, and indeed the recession in Ireland has been deeper than any other European country. You know, last year gross national product fell by 11.3%, which was the largest annual decline in economic activity since records began. And the reason for that collapse in economic activity was because we had created a totally unsustainable housing market bubble, which has burst. And I think most sensible people would recognise that where the economy was going was not sustainable. We have crashed. We now need to turn around and create a more sustainable and balanced economy again. And as I said earlier, most sensible Irish people buy into that concept. And even the trade unions at this stage are grudgingly moving towards acceptance of the medicine that needs to be taken to recreate the Irish economy. And I think for other European countries like Greece particularly, but also for Portugal, for Italy, for Spain, it is going, and indeed outside of the single European zone, the United Kingdom, there has to be an acceptance that spending will have to be cut, that taxes will have to be increased if they want to create sustainable public finances again. If they don't, they will end up paying a very high price.
Meanwhile, one of Britain's foremost businessmen and entrepreneurs, Sir Richard Branson, actually thinks the crisis facing the Eurozone has been contained. In an interview with Counting the Cost here in Doha, Branson also said the UK, with its new government in place, now needs to take some serious steps too.
I think that what the European government did has actually overcome the problem in Europe. I mean, you know, if they hadn't moved quickly, well, they could have moved quicker. But if they hadn't actually, you know, stemmed the problem.
But you really think they've stemmed it, not just postponed it and put a safety net in?
I mean, personally, I think they've got on top of the problem, and the speculators, you know, the speculators must realise that you know, that there's a lot of firepower against them, and I think that, you know, if they frighten the speculators off, which I think they have done, I think that will give time for the tough medicine that some countries are going to have to take, you know, to work through the system. There's no question that Greece needs tough medicine, but even, you know, Great Britain. I mean, you know, the country's overspent, and I think the new Conservative government and the Liberal Democratic government are going to impose tough measures quickly, so that we can get our finances in order, and the rest of Europe needs to do the same.
And you can see our interview with Sir Richard Branson in full on the next edition of Counting the Cost. Very interesting chat we had too. First run out of that Friday, May 21st here on Al Jazeera. So we've heard from an economist, an entrepreneur. What about a Eurozone business leader? What would they think of the EU's handling of this crisis? Kristen Salumi caught up with the co-CEO of the world's biggest business software maker, that's Germany's SAP. She put that very question to Bill McDermott in New York.
Well, I think it's good that this situation is stabilized, and clearly it helped businesses all over the world to solidify the solvency situation and stabilize the economic scenario. I think over time we're going to have to work on the governance and the root causes of all this, but that's for a different day and probably a different talk. I'm just happy that it's solved. I think businesses have moved on, and we should be just fine.
So you're not fearful that the crisis is going to spread to other countries?
I am not. No, I am not.
What has this crisis done for business? Is consumer demand holding up?
Yeah, actually, you know, businesses are a little less volatile in their reaction to these dynamics because we expect them. Business executives don't change their strategy because of a 24 or 48 or even a 72-hour crisis. These happen all the time. So you try to stay focused on your strategy, focused on your customer and your people and driving your mission. And I think most executives feel that way. So I really did not see a backlash on the part of customers or executives to this crisis.
What about the situation a few weeks ago, the ash cloud that shut down flights all over Europe? Did that affect your business?
That was tough. Everyone had a tough time getting out. I got out myself on that famous Friday, very luckily. There's no question that the dynamics of these kinds of crises change markets and can destabilize markets. In the business that I'm in, we sell software to help you manage things like supply chain and business networks. So for example, if you have an issue such as the cloud, what are you going to do to augment your supply chain so you can still get your goods and your services to your customers? If you have an oil spill somewhere off the coast of Louisiana, what might you do to shift the way you will market, ship, and deliver goods and services to your customers? So these real-time episodes are something we're quite used to, and frankly, that's the business we're in. Governance, risk, compliance, supply chain, optimizing business networks, it's all things that SAP is very successful in.
Talking about the economy in general, where do we stand in terms of the global recovery? And are some regions better off than others, for your business in particular?
Yeah, sure. I think the Brazil, Russia, India, China scenario is very strong. We see them growing much more quickly than the mature ones. The large markets like Europe and US, as examples, have stabilized, and they are showing now signs of growth again, at least in the information technology industry. Asia Pacific remains a very strong geography, and Japan seems to have stabilized and is now looking towards growth, at least as it relates to IT. So overall, I think growth is back on the boardroom agenda of companies. They know they have to invest to innovate and to grow. And frankly, companies that don't invest in information technology and revamping their operations and their business models will get left behind. You can't save your way to greatness. You can only go so far with that strategy.
When counting the cost returns, we talked to Algeria's oil minister about, among other things, the effect of the Euro crisis on oil. And this famous British store sold for more than $2 billion. We'll tell you who the new owner is and what they plan to do with it.